My son-in-law accidentally sent me my daughter's lunchbox, and when I opened it, my whole body froze. My hands shook as I stared at what no mother should ever have to see. Instead of breaking down, I steadied myself and wrote down every single detail. That moment was only the beginning of a storm none of them saw coming. Before I share it, I'd love to know, how are you doing today? And where are you listening from? The air was still that afternoon, warm with the promise of spring. I had been folding laundry in the quiet rhythm of my small wooden house, the kind of task that keeps the hands busy while the mind drifts. Birmingham's streets outside hummed faintly with traffic, and somewhere down the block a child's laughter rose, then disappeared. It was ordinary, comfortably so, until the knock at my door. I opened it to find a box left on the porch, no note attached, just the familiar red and blue lunchbox that belonged to my son-in-law. Ransom. My brows knit together. Ransom was not the type to involve me in anything, let alone food. He guarded his routines like locked drawers, and even when Naraya, my daughter, cooked, he rarely let her send leftovers to me. I picked the box up, feeling its unexpected weight, the handle warm from the sun. The plastic smelled faintly of fried chicken and something metallic underneath, a dissonance that made me pause. Sometimes the smallest things carry the heaviest truths, I whispered, more to steady myself than anything else. My fingers hovered at the latch, my chest tight with curiosity and unease. When I opened it, the click of the clasp sounded louder than it should have. Inside, I expected sandwiches, maybe fruit, but instead I found neat plastic containers stacked alongside papers folded too carefully to be accidental. My heart thudded as I reached for the top sheet. Medical charts, no financial records. The name scrawled at the top wasn't Ransom's. It was Naraya's. I sank into the chair by the window, the paper trembling between my fingers. Numbers, codes, signatures I didn't recognize spilled across the page. My daughter's name tethered to accounts and notations that smelled of deceit. Why would Ransom be carrying these? Why hide them in a lunchbox like contraband? Confusion turned sharp. A mother knows the steady beat of her child's life, even when grown. And this did not belong to Naraya. I felt the disbelief coil into anger. Lord, I murmured, pressing the paper flat against the table. What have they dragged her into? I dug deeper, lifting one container after another. At the bottom, tucked beneath a half-eaten roll, I found a small Ziploc bag. My stomach dropped. Off-white pills, plain, unmarked. They glared up at me like silent accusations. My hand shook so hard I almost spilled them. Unlabeled pills meant secrets, and secrets meant danger. I thought of Naraya's tired eyes, her sudden excuses to leave family gatherings early, the way her laughter had dulled. Had he been slipping these to her, keeping her subdued under my very nose, baby? What has he been giving you? I whispered into the empty room, my voice breaking at the edges. I pressed the bag flat against my palm, staring at those harmless-looking tablets. Fear clawed through me, but behind it was anger at myself for not noticing. Anger at him for thinking he could bend her will with chemicals. I sat back, clutching the lunchbox to my chest as if it might bite. My mind spun with choices. Confront him now, slam the evidence on the table and demand answers, or wait. Play the silence he always mistook for weakness in the South. Silence isn't always weakness. Sometimes it's a weapon sharper than any blade. Memories flooded dinners where my voice was drowned out by his. Naraya's eyes darting away when I asked how she was feeling. The way he smiled too broadly when I tried to press. All those small signals I ignored because I didn't want to believe my daughter's marriage was poison. I slipped the documents and the pills back into the box, snapping the latch shut with care. I would not give him the satisfaction of knowing I had peeked inside. Not yet, but in that moment, I made a vow. I would not let Naraya slip further into his grip. As evening settled, shadows stretched across my living room, and I sat staring at the box perched on my table. Its weight seemed unbearable now, a vessel carrying secrets too heavy for any mother. I traced its handle with my fingertip, wondering if it had been delivered by mistake or if the mistake was believing Ransom capable of accidents at all. The house creaked softly as night approached. I leaned forward, whispering to the quiet, if this box found its way to me, Maybe it was never an accident at all. And that thought kept me awake the entire night. I woke before sunrise, long before the birds began their chatter in the oak tree outside my bedroom window. Sleep had been thin as paper, restless from the weight of the lunchbox that still sat on my kitchen shelf. I brewed coffee, the familiar hiss and pop of the old kettle grounding me, but the taste was bitter no matter how much cream I stirred in. The memory of those documents and pills played again, like a film reel I couldn't shut off. No, this was not a mistake, I thought. Not some casual mix-up. This box was a message or maybe a warning, but either way, it was mine to interpret. I cleared a space on my table and spread everything out: the folded papers, the photos I had snapped, the little bag tucked safely inside an envelope now. I made neat stacks, one for each type of record, careful not to crease anything. Beside them, I laid out my yellow legal pad in careful script. I wrote the date, the hour I found the box, and the condition of every item inside. A chain of memory was fragile, but a chain on paper could stand the test of scrutiny. I whispered aloud, the sound steadying me. Quiet is how truth learns to walk. I reminded myself what not to do: no raised voices, no accusing stares, no rushing to Naraya with the weight of my suspicion. Patience was armor, silence could be sharper than a knife. By mid-morning, I leaned in close to the documents. One sheet in particular made my pulse quicken, a power of attorney. I traced the notary's seal with my fingertip, frowning at the placement. It overlapped a line where it shouldn't, sloppy in a way Naraya never was. Her name sprawled across the bottom, but it wasn't her hurried left-handed signature, the one I'd seen on school permission slips and birthday cards since she was 17. This one was smooth, too polished, like it had been drawn slowly by someone with time to copy. Then my eyes caught the date. I knew it immediately because I had marked it on my wall calendar months ago. That was the very week Naraya was in the clinic, laid up with an infection, hooked to IVs, hardly able to lift her hand. She couldn't have been signing legal papers then. A slow, burning anger crawled up my chest. Forgery. It screamed of Ransom's hand all over it. He thought the old woman and me wouldn't notice, but I did. I always did. I took photographs of each page with my phone, making sure the timestamp showed. Then, sticky notes with quick observations: seal misplaced, date impossible, signature mismatch. It wasn't evidence for court yet, but it was evidence enough for me. I fought the pull to dial Naraya. My heart wanted to run to her, to wrap her up and demand the truth. But my mind knew better. If I went too fast, Ransom would sniff it out and bury everything deeper. Late afternoon, I carried a casserole to Naraya's house. A pretext as natural as breathing. No one questions a mother bringing food. She opened the door with a smile too quick, too rehearsed, and kissed my cheek. "Mama, you didn't have to. I wanted to," I interrupted softly, handing her the dish. Inside. The kitchen gleamed like something from a magazine. Counters wiped spotless, not a crumb in sight. That kind of tidiness could mean pride or it could mean control. While she stepped into the laundry room with a pile of clothes, her phone lit up on the counter. My eyes caught it before I could look away. "Send me proof you're home now." My heart dropped into my stomach. The capital letters, the demand for proof, the timestamp glaring back. I didn't touch the phone. I only memorized the words, the time, the weight of it pressing into me. By the time she returned, smiling again, I'd folded my face back into calm. We sat across from each other. I asked about her day, her work, her garden. She answered, but her eyes flicked toward the clock, then the phone, not once, but twice. My pulse matched the ticking of that clock. I sipped water from the glass she set in front of me, noting how her own glass rested on a coaster lined up perfectly with the grain of the table. That wasn't Naraya's habit, it was his. He had trained her into symmetry, into fear disguised as neatness. She asked if I'd heard about a neighborhood meeting Ransom was planning. I smiled, shook my head, and talked about the church bake sale instead. Safety lay in the ordinary. "How are you sleeping?" I asked gently. "Fine," she answered too fast, then added, "I've been taking vitamins." Her smile faltered. I didn't push, I simply breathed, letting her see that my patience could be a shelter. Inside, though, I filed away every word, every tick of her voice. Later, patterns would tell the truth. That evening, back at my house, I slid my notes into a manila folder I labeled Paper Trail. The lunchbox, sealed again, rested high on a shelf, wrapped like something sacred, I whispered to myself. No shouting, no scene, just truth, layered until it can't be denied. My phone buzzed on the counter. A voicemail transcribed itself before my eyes. Bank verification call about a property-linked inquiry. My stomach tightened. Another footprint, left too fresh to ignore. If this was the beginning of his paper trail, he had just shown me the direction to follow. The morning began in the same quiet rhythm as always, but the voicemail from the bank still sat heavy in my mind. I didn't return the call. Not yet. My kitchen table had turned into a command center. A manila folder marked Paper Trail stretched open, pages and notes layered like a puzzle. I added fresh entries to my yellow pad, dates lined up beside times and places, making sure nothing slipped. I wrote a heading across the top of a fresh page before the lunchbox. That phrase carried weight. I had to remind myself that the box was just the match there had been smoke curling long before. I reached for my wall calendar and a shoebox filled with old church bulletins and family invitations. These scraps helped me anchor memories to real dates, grounding them in something more solid than a drifting recollection. My eyes caught a faded photo propped on the sideboard. Naraya smiled in it, but her shoulders leaned ever so slightly away from Ransom. As if her body betrayed the caution her lips never spoke, I murmured aloud. What didn't make sense then will land true if I let it talk long enough. My own voice steadied me, like a friend who never left. Last spring, I remembered expecting Naraya to be at my cousin's 80th birthday. I had ordered the cake myself, thick with buttercream roses, and set an extra chair close to the head of the table. That morning, she texted, "We can't make it work, emergency." The words had stung, but I had believed them. Now I looked again at my phone bill. The timestamp of her message lined up with the exact hour the rain had started, and I remembered my neighbor by Mr. Lowell, leaning over the fence that night, saw Ransom's SUV parked out front all day. Didn't look like it moved. At the time, I brushed it off, but the memory returned sharp. Later, Ransom explained with that easy grin of his. Didn't want to put miles on the car in the storm. His eyes never held mine steady. That should have told me everything. It wasn't just one missed birthday. It was the pattern. I listed them on my pad, sudden work excuses, car troubles on holidays, reasons that painted Naraya as irresponsible if she disagreed. It was isolation disguised as convenience. I underlined my thought. Control thrives in the small nose birthdays, holidays, any day that would have filled her cup. Another memory pressed forward. One sticky summer afternoon, Naraya stopped by for a porch visit. When I hugged her, I felt her flinch. My hand brushed her forearm, and under the thin cotton sleeve, I found a tender spot that made her pull back fast. She laughed it off. I bumped the cabinet. I'm clumsy. The excuse slid out too quickly, rehearsed like lines from a play. I remembered the way she switched to long sleeves the next week, though the air was thick with heat. Air conditioning cold, she said, brushing off my raised brow. I wrote it all down, flinch, sleeve change, cabinet story. Then I added a note to my self-document. Don't confront. That day I told her, honey, cabinets don't bruise. Hearts, be gentle with yourself. She gave me a smile that looked practiced. Careful, the kind that hides more than it shows. By late afternoon, my table was covered in grids of memory. I made columns: date, event, Ransom's excuse, Naraya's response, my observation. I marked dots for isolation, slashes for financial strain, stars for bodily signs. The symbols filled in like constellations, and I could see the shape of the cage he'd been building around her. I circled the points I could cross-check neighbor recollections, clinic appointments, church attendance. Each thread was something I could tug without alerting him. I rehearsed quiet questions in my mind, lines I could drop into conversation without raising alarms. No accusations, just data, one piece of truth at a time. At the bottom of the page, I wrote the line that carried me forward. Don't let anger drive and let the evidence walk. By evening, the folder was full again. I placed the lunchbox back on the top shelf, wrapped and untouched. The porch light hummed outside, and a distant train horn cut through the air, like it was counting down to something I could feel but not yet see. My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from Naraya. Dinner tomorrow, he says we should all talk. that he needed no name. I typed back a neutral yes, then turned the phone face down. My hand slipped into my purse, checking the slim voice recorder I'd tucked there. If tomorrow is theater, I whispered, I won't miss a single line. I crossed the threshold into Naraya's home just as the sun dipped low, painting the blinds in gold slats. My purse was heavier than usual, though the recorder inside was no bigger than a pen. I had promised myself no anger, no raised voices, just listening. The smell of roast chicken floated in the air, but the house didn't feel lived in. Everything was arranged as if for inspection, placemats squared with the table edges, silverware aligned with military precision, cushions smoothed down until no crease remained. Ransom greeted me with a polished smile, warm enough for show, but his eyes measured me like a surveyor marking land. Naraya hovered near him, her movements careful, her glances quick in his direction as if she needed permission to exhale. I noticed where he placed me at the seat facing the window, back turned to the kitchen. Control through placement. I set down my sweater and eased into small talk, mentioning the church bake sale and the children's spring calendar. My voice was light, practiced, the kind that made people underestimate me. As I spoke, I clocked details of folder tucked on the buffet with a tab sticking out, a phone lying face down near his elbow, the slow tick of the wall clock stretching each pause like a string pulled taut. Inside, I drew my boundaries if he needled me. I wouldn't bite. Instead, I'd ask questions that forced him to explain himself. Dinner began with the clink of glasses, but instead of wine, Ransom poured water. Discipline, he said, raising his glass and looking at Naraya like the word was a compliment. He talked about their new budgeting goals, how they were a team working on structure. Naraya nodded too fast, each nod a quiet submission. I listened for patterns his language stitched with control, we decided. She agreed. Our rules. I asked about the clinic shifts, about whether little Isolde had outgrown her scooter yet. Naraya answered, her words short, her eyes flicking to him first as if she were running a test before speaking. Ransom corrected me with a thin smile. It's not a scooter, it's a balance bike. He leaned back, voice sliding into a lecture about how structure keeps people from spiraling. I let silence fill the space, an old trick I'd learned. Control hates silence, it rushes to fill it. He did, rattling on about calendars and curfews until the words became their own confession. Naraya's hand drifted to her wrist, pressing it lightly, as though reminding herself not to fidget. I caught it and tucked it away in memory. The insult came over chicken and green beans. Ransom's fork clinked against his plate as he said, "She's better since she stopped listening to you." The words burned, but I kept my tone even. Better how I asked, not looking at him but at Naraya. My calm forced him to define his jab. He listed improvements as if reciting a grocery list. Better sleep, better spending, fewer mood swings. He added that my old-fashioned ways had made her anxious. I leaned back, my eyes steady. When did the sleep get better, before or after those vitamins Naraya froze? Staring at her plate as though the peas had turned to glass, his smirk widened. Boundaries helped. The fork hit the porcelain again, sharp punctuation to his claim. Inside, I steadied myself. This wasn't about me. This was about cutting her off from her lifelines. From me. I refused to defend. I logged his words instead, stopped listening. Boundaries, better since... Words I would return to, like stones in a sling. The folder on the buffet made its way to the table soon enough. Responsible spending, Ransom announced, sliding out a page labeled Weekly Cash Naraya. Inside the envelope lay 2 crumpled tens. Keeps impulse buys down, he said proudly, as though rationing his wife was a moral virtue. Naraya flinched, her voice small. I don't need much. I tilted my head and asked with soft practicality. If Isolde wants a t-shirt for School Spirit Day or a snack on a field trip? What happens, she asks first. We plan it, he replied smoothly, as though her every breath required clearance. Naraya touched the envelope like it might burn her fingers. My eyes memorized the line printed in ink, $20, no rollovers. I breathed slowly, letting the words settle into my record. Budgeting is useful, I said evenly. So is autonomy. I thanked them for dinner, folded my napkin, and set it on the plate. My voice stayed level. I hear you both, and I'll keep paying attention. Ransom chuckled, a low sound that scraped, as long as it's from a distance. His smile never reached his eyes. I met Naraya's gaze across the table and said quietly, "What's yours should feel like yours. No sermon, just a truth she could carry." I stood scanning the folder, the envelope, the smug curve of his smile. I caught each detail like seeds I would plant later. At the door, my purse hummed. My phone lit up voicemail from the same bank number. The subject line glowing, property-linked inquiry pending signature. My breath steadied. If his power lived on paper, I would follow those papers until they led me straight to the door he didn't want opened. At sunrise, the light cut across my dining table, catching the edge of the manila folder I'd left open the night before. The bank's voicemail still sat on my phone, a reminder that silence only lasts so long before it demands an answer. I dialed the number back, my voice steady, my breath measured. "Mrs. Gray." "Thank you for returning our call," the representative said politely. His tone carried that careful weight people use when they know more than they're allowed to say. He mentioned ongoing mortgage adjustments connected to Naraya Caldwin's name, with a secondary signer listed as Ransom Vaylor. I asked for dates. He hesitated, then read from the file an electronic signature time-stamped on a weekday morning when I knew Naraya had been at the clinic. Tending patients, I wrote everything down: mortgage ID, file date, the phrase spousal acknowledgement clause, my handwriting sharp with intent. He told me gently that without Naraya present, he couldn't disclose further details. But the polite unease in his voice told me plenty. I ended the call with a soft thank you, then whispered to myself, "Paper leaves ink, and ink doesn't lie." By midday, I found myself beneath the high ceilings of the downtown Birmingham branch. My Sunday hat shaded my face, and my purse hung neat at my side. I asked for public-facing filings, voice low but firm. The clerk, a man about my age, eyes cautious but kind, slid redacted pages across the desk. Payment schedules, property lien filings, lines of type that looked ordinary unless you knew where to look. I circled timestamps in pen, aligning them with Naraya's clinic shifts. Again and again. Her signature appeared while she'd been behind a nurse's desk, not a banker's counter. One line leapt out: authorization override manual input. My jaw tightened. That wasn't her. That was someone writing her life in ink without her hand. The clerk leaned in slightly, lowering his voice. "Ma'am, if something feels wrong, trust that feeling, He didn't have to say more. We both knew kindness can be risky in places where rules walk tightropes. I folded the copies carefully, the weight of those papers heavier than any sermon. By evening, I sat in a quiet cafe across from Valora Mays, Naraya's colleague. She wore her work scrub still, the edges frayed from long shifts, her face marked by worry that wasn't hers to carry. "She rushes out of here the second her shift ends," Valora told me, voice hushed over the hum of the espresso machine, phone to her ear, breathless like she's running to catch her own shadow. I let her talk, nodding. "She told me once she doesn't have a card in her name." Valora added, "Cash only, $20 envelopes." I laughed, thought she was joking. Then I saw her eyes water. My chest ached, but I kept my face calm, my pen moving silently over the legal pad. Valora's hands twisted in her lap. One day at lunch, she whispered, "I feel safer at work than at home." I reached across the table, laid my hand on hers. "Thank you for holding part of her story until she could give it herself." Her eyes met mine, shining with both guilt and relief. I absorbed every word. Confirmation from another voice meant my fears weren't paranoia, they were proof. Back home, my dining table became a battlefield again. I spread the papers out: the forged POA, the lunchbox pills, the bank timestamps, Valora's testimony. I drew a timeline across my pad: isolation from family, financial chokehold, physical bruises, legal forgeries. I circled what was missing: Naraya's direct confirmation, hard proof of coercion, aloud. I rehearsed one question. "When did you stop signing for yourself?" The words echoed through the room, sharp and steady. If control hides in daylight, then daylight will strip it bare. My notes no longer felt like records, they felt like a plan sharpening itself. Night came heavy. I locked the porch door, but headlights spilled across my driveway, too bright, too close. His SUV idled, humming like a threat dressed as courtesy. Then the knock rattled my screen door. His voice came low, falsely polite. "Just checking on you, Mom." I stood in silence. My breath slowed, my eyes fixed on the door. I let the quiet stretch until the engine finally roared and the SUV rolled away. "If he's knocking," I whispered, "he knows I'm close." I slipped the recorder and the lunchbox into a tote, ready to keep them close no matter where I went. The theater he thought he controlled was shifting, and next time, I'd be the one holding the script. I woke before the sun stretched across Birmingham, my mind still holding the sound of Ransom's knock from last night. Fear would have me pacing, but discipline had me clearing the dining table instead. I drew the blinds tight, silencing the view from the street, then flipped my phone into airplane mode. No interruptions, no signals drifting through. The old laptop, stripped of Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, hummed quietly as I set it down. On the table, I laid cotton gloves, a notepad, and the lunchbox. Its weight was heavier than any pot roast or Sunday pie this box carried. Silence that wasn't innocent. I dated a fresh page in my notebook. Writing across the top, USB. Camera initial handling. Chain of custody. I'd seen enough courtroom dramas to know you don't break your own record. I breathed deep. No yelling, no chasing, I told myself, steadying my hands. Let the evidence talk. The house was so still I could hear the hum of the refrigerator, the rhythm of a place waiting for truth. When I lifted the lid, the plastic container sat on one side, but the corner lining didn't lie flat. That was my signal something hid where it didn't belong. The USB looked plain enough, just a stick of plastic, but when I slid it into the offline laptop, one folder blinked on screen, a list of audio files with dates. I clicked the first. Ransom's voice spilled into my kitchen, low and clipped. "Sign it, or I'll have to note your instability." The words hit me like cold water, but I kept my hands still. Another file followed Naraya's voice. Soft. "Careful, I don't feel right about this." His reply snapped over her like a whip. "You don't need to feel. You need to comply." I wrote down every word, jotting timestamps, noting background sounds, the clink of silverware, the ding of a microwave, details that tied the threat to a room, to a day, to a man's intent. One clip chilled me more. He paired doctor visits with paperwork, weaving care into coercion. I copied everything onto a separate drive, labeling it neat. In my notes, I wrote coercion audio confirmed, intimidation under medical pretext. Protective fury burned in my chest, but I kept it sealed tight. Justice moves slower than rage, and I needed the evidence intact. As I shifted the lunchbox, a crinkle caught my ear. The lining near the zipper track puffed odd. I slid a gloved finger beneath and found a pinhole lens wired to a micro SD card and a battery no bigger than a thumb. My stomach clenched. I dropped it into a metal tin to cut any signal, then opened the files. Video clips rolled out in grainy stillness, Naraya's hand setting down a bowl, Ransom's shadow passing by, the lunchbox being filled, angles matched countertop height, kitchen islands, dinner hours. Then the last file froze me the image of my own backsplash, my own kitchen wall, caught just seconds long. The device hadn't just sat in her home, it had watched mine. I photographed every angle, the seam, the module, the serial number. Then I logged it, plain surveillance device recovered. Recorded at my residence after delivery. Cold dread tightened my chest, but dread didn't run me. I pressed the tin shut and breathed back into calm. I texted Naraya during her shift 10 minutes for air. We met by the clinic lot, her shoulders bent under the weight of things unsaid. I didn't unload it all. Truth can drown a person if poured too fast. Instead, I placed one earbud in her ear and pressed play on a single clip. Ransom's voice came through. "Sign it. Instability." Her eyes flickered wide. She swallowed hard. "He said it was to keep our life simple." She whispered. I looked her steady. Simple doesn't need threats. I didn't mention the camera yet. That would come when her spine was steadier. For now, I gave her a lifeline. "If you ever need me without questions, just text me, bring the lemon pie." Her hand squeezed mine. She walked back toward the clinic. Stepped straight for 3 paces before she remembered to shrink herself small again. That, more than anything, broke my heart. By late afternoon, my dining table bore new files, photographs, USB copies, logs, timelines. I slipped the module into the fireproof pouch, labeled a new envelope surveillance, and stacked everything neat. I underlined one line in my notebook. He wants invisibility. Give him mirrors. As the sun lowered, the landline rang, once then cut, no caller ID. My cell buzzed soon after, a text from an unknown number. You have something that isn't yours. I powered the phone off, steady as stone. If you're watching. I said into the quiet, understand, so am I. Then I clicked through one last overlooked file. My breath caught. The still frame showed my dining table that very morning. Time-stamped minutes before I'd found the camera. Late morning found me carrying 2 grocery bags up Naraya's driveway. Sunlight flashing on Isolde's little scooter leaned against the porch rail. Everyday life tried to breathe in that yard, but my ears caught a faint click as I brushed past the bumper of her sedan. The sound was too sharp for gravel, too pointed for wind. I crouched, knees stiff but steady, and there it was. A black box, no bigger than a soap bar, clinging magnet strong near the wheel well. I didn't touch it barehanded, cotton gloves on. I snapped photos from 3 angles: the mount point, the grit on the seam, the magnet lock. Proof sat under that car like a snake coiled quiet. I slid a clean plastic container underneath, shielding it, then called toward the porch. Naraya, honey, hand me your keys for a minute, I'll run the oil check. Neutral voice, no panic. She came to the door, eyes darting across my face. I smiled, calm as church linen. She passed me the keys and said, thank you, Mama, inside me. The words landed hard. Control doesn't just guard a kitchen. It wants a map. If he thinks he knows where she is, he thinks he owns where she can go. The neighborhood auto shop smelled of rubber and grease, familiar as old hymnals. Deshawn, the mechanic, listened without flinching. He lifted the car, light spilling across the underbelly, then worked careful. Ma'am, you brought gloves and a bag, he said softly. You already knew. Just need it off clean. I answered. He photographed the mount point, popped the tracker free, and sealed it into the evidence bag I'd brought. We both signed across the tape, date and time neat. This one's common, he explained. GPS with SIM, serials here. Scuffs say it's fresh, not more than a few weeks old. He printed a receipt, customer requested non-functional device removal. Timestamp stamped bold. His eyes lifted to mine. Folks install these to keep tabs. If you feel watched, you likely are. I tucked the tracker into my tin beside the lunchbox evidence. We felt it. I said, voice even. Now we can prove it. Cash paid. No paper trail but the one I wanted. He promised to send photos to my offline account. I walked out with more than a receipt. I walked out with one more knot tied in his rope. By evening, I returned Naraya's car. She met me at the door, apron dusted with flour like she'd tried to bake away her nerves. Her phone buzzed once, then again, rattling the counter. I smiled easy. Church ladies still asking about your lemon bars. Her laugh flickered, then faded. The phone buzzed once more. She leaned close, whispering. He pings me if I don't answer in 5 minutes. Time, I told her steady, is not a leash, baby. We checked our code again, bring the lemon pie, our signal for help without questions, I reminded her. Keep ID, some cash, Isolde's jacket ready. I didn't tell her about the tracker sitting quiet in my tote. Sometimes truth too soon feels like a storm. As I left, a sedan crawled past the corner, slower than traffic should. My hand lifted like I was fixing my scarf, but my phone caught the plate in a window reflection. Habit, not fear. Near midnight, my bedroom ceiling glowed blue. Naraya's number, I answered, and her voice cracked like a twig. Bring the lemon pie. I was up before the words ended. Shoes on, tote-packed recorder, USB copy, tracker in tin, cash folded neat. My reply was one line on my way. Location off, 2 blocks shy of her house. I parked and walked. Flats, not heels, quiet matters. Sodium lights carved long shadows down the street. Naraya slipped from the side gate, coat thrown over pajamas. Her breath fogged pale in the cool night. He's at a meeting, she whispered. If my phone doesn't move, he'll circle back. Then we'll take a walk, I answered. Boring night on the outside, freedom breathing underneath. We circled the block, steps timed with the hush of crickets. At her mailbox, she typed a text, left the lemon pie on the porch. Night, pattern satisfied, mask preserved. Back at her gate, I slipped an envelope into her pocket, spare flip phone. Cash. Harlan Briscoe's card clipped with a paperclip. If the night turns loud, this number picks up. If the day turns long, this cash buys you time, I told her. Tears rimmed her eyes. I don't want Isolde to grow up thinking this is love. Then we won't call it that, I said. A car slowed on the street. We stepped back into shadow until it passed. At the gate, her hand squeezed mine twice our yes. Later, in my kitchen. My phone buzzed again. New voicemail transcript. No number. You're moving pieces that don't belong to you. Attached was a blurred photo of me and Naraya by her mailbox, taken minutes earlier. By noon the next day, my tote weighed heavier than groceries. Inside the USB copy, transcripts, photos of the tracker and the hidden camera, the lunchbox sealed in a clear bag. I arrived at the church annex early, the air inside still carrying last night's potluck. Folding chairs lined the room, sunlight angling through high windows. I asked the sexton for a small table near the wall outlet and tested the PA with an old cord, no wireless tricks, nothing that could be hijacked. The microphone hummed, and I whispered into it. Steady as prayer, we're here for community safety. Harlan Briscoe met me by the coffee urn. His handshake was brief but firm. We agreed on the order, my story first, his confirmation second. He'd reference the law only if pressed. I laid out 2 folders at stage left: financial coercion and surveillance. People filed in: neighbors, committee members. Valora Mays finding a seat in the back row. Ransom arrived late, strolling easy, greeting folks by name as though charm could launder truth. Naraya slipped in behind him. Quiet as a shadow, I stepped to the mic. Voice plain. We're here to talk about safety in homes, in money, in how we treat each other. I held up the clear bag with the lunchbox. This came to me by mistake. A ripple of murmurs ran through the chairs. Ransom smirked, leaning back, arms folded. I set the recorder down, pressed play. His clipped voice filled the hall. Sign it, or I'll have to note your instability. Then Naraya's whisper, fragile as tissue, I don't feel right about this. Gasps. A chair scraped loud. I let the silence stretch before pressing another file. In this one. He braided doctor visits with paperwork, confusing care with command. These are dated files. I told them. Holding up the log sheet, time-stamped. Background sounds, microwave beeps. Silverware clinks, put them in a kitchen we all know. Ransom pushed forward, voice sharp. That's edited, I kept calm. Then you'll welcome a review. Here's the chain of custody. I lifted the page marked with signatures and dates. I turned back to the room. Control changes the meaning of love. Today, we're naming it plain. Next, I opened the folder marked financial coercion. I held up the bank printouts, pages streaked with redacted blocks but showing repeated logins from the same IP while Naraya was working her clinic shifts. This line right here, I pointed. Authorization override manual input. That's not an accident. Harlan stepped forward, speaking in plain language. Overrides demand justification. If someone's faking signatures, this is where they hide. I moved to the second folder, showing the photos the pinhole camera pulled from the lunchbox seam, the tracker retrieved from Naraya's car. I read aloud the serial and I Deshawn had logged. Ransom's laugh was thin. That was for home safety, for budget discipline, misunderstood boundaries. I fixed my gaze steady. Then why hide a camera in the zipper seam? Why slip a tracker under a bumper? Why call a woman unstable when she says no? Valora stood in the back, her voice trembling but strong. She told me she felt safer at work than at home. The room stilled. Silence landed like judgment. I stepped back, and Harlan took one stride forward. These materials will be given to the authorities, he said, voice low but carrying. He explained only what mattered: patterns of coercion, signs of fraud, financial chokeholds, no courtroom terms, just language anyone could understand. I handed him the envelope labeled Copies for Review. He opened it before the crowd and dialed the non-emergency line, asking for a liaison officer. Ransom spat the word vindictive at me. I didn't rise. I pressed play on a single line again. Sign it, or I'll have to note your instability. The room murmured, heads turning his way. I closed with one sentence. Plain as bread, what's hers should feel like hers. This I tapped to the bagged lunchbox never felt like love. 2 ushers edged closer to the aisle. The sexton stood near the door. The committee chair thanked us, calling it courage, not scandal. When the mic went quiet, people pressed close, some offering rides, others offering their numbers written on scraps of paper. Naraya stood still, shoulders shaking until Valora's arms circled her. Harlan leaned close, whispering, "We'll file copies today. Keep the originals safe." I slid the recorder and the lunchbox back into my tote, sealing them like treasures. At the back. Ransom lingered, thumb moving furiously across his phone. He glanced up once, smile too bright, before stepping outside. Through the glass, I saw him make a call. My phone buzzed in my tote. A message from an unknown number, a photo of his old school hallway, time-stamped 5 minutes earlier. Cold climbed the back of my neck. I turned to Naraya. "We go together. Now!" Her eyes locked on mine, full of fear but edged with resolve. Valora grabbed her bag without question. We pushed through the annex doors into the hard Alabama sun, Harlan following close behind. We took the long way to Isolde's school that Monday morning, not to hide but to see if anyone followed the fear instead of the facts. Naraya held her daughter's hand. Valora walked at her other side, and I stayed just a step behind, watchful, inside the office. The staff greeted us politely, but their eyes carried that careful distance people use when they have already heard something. News moves faster than cars in this town. The principal welcomed us into her office, listening as we spoke about attendance and safety. She nodded, expression grave. "Children carry silence heavy," she said, her hand resting lightly on a folder as if it weighed more than papers. While we adults spoke, Isolde sat in the corner, sketching in her notebook. I leaned over when we rose to leave. Her picture showed a house split in two, one side in color, the other shaded dark. My chest ached, out of the mouths of babes. "The truth draws itself." "Outside," Valora murmured. "They're already whispering in the parking lot." I steadied my voice. "Let them whisper. Truth makes its own noise. But inside, I thought about echoes. They travel farther than the sound itself." By late morning, the spin had begun. Screens lit up with Ransom's posts, his words polished to make himself the misunderstood husband. He claimed the recordings were doctored, the tracker a safety precaution, the finances simple family planning. Screenshots flew across group texts, bouncing from kitchen to kitchen. Naraya's hands shook as she scrolled, reading the comments. Some neighbors rushed to defend him, others to doubt. "They're believing him." She whispered. I touched her wrist. "Spins are temporary. Paper trails are permanent." A neighbor stopped by with a pie, mask of kindness over rehearsed lines. "He only wanted her cared for," she said. I looked her straight in the eyes. "Control is not care. Intimidation is not love." She flushed, mumbled something, and left. I wrote down the time in which she repeated every lie. Even borrowed was still proof of awareness. By afternoon, we gathered back at my kitchen. Soup simmered on the stove, cornbread cooling on the counter. The silence at the table was heavy until I broke it. "What's ours is still ours," I said, laying the evidence envelope flat. "No headline changes that." Valora nodded slowly. "Him trying to control the story means he's scared, not strong." Naraya pressed her palms together, her lips trembling. "But what if people choose his story over mine?" I reached across, folding her fingers into mine. "Then we let time choose. Truth is patient. Lies are impatient." We practiced short answers for when the questions came in the grocery aisle or at the gas pump. Lines like, "We're handling it properly," and "The files are with counsel." Simple, sturdy phrases to hold back gossip's flood. Her shoulders eased a little. She ate a spoonful of soup and whispered, "I almost taste peace in this." That evening, we went to Valora's apartment. She disappeared into her closet and returned with a box, her hands trembling as she set it down. "I kept these," she said, voice rough. Inside were old letters and voicemail tapes from Ransom. She confessed, tears gathering. I held on to them out of fear, not loyalty. We played one tape. His voice bled through, younger but the same menace. "Sign it, or I'll have to note your instability." The words almost identical to the lunchbox recording? Naraya gasped, covering her mouth. "So it wasn't just me?" Valora wept openly. I thought if I stayed quiet, it would stop. I held her hand firm. "Silence doesn't stop men like him. Voice does." We copied the tapes into digital files, dated them. and logged them into the archive. It wasn't months of proof anymore, it was years. When we left, the night air was cool, sharp against our faces. My tote held more than paper, it held years of someone else's shadow work. Naraya walked taller beside me. Truth is a kind of oxygen. She was finally breathing some... On my porch, I said aloud what pressed on me. We thought we caught him this year. Turns out he's been rehearsing for decades. Across the street, a car idled, lights off, engine steady. After a long minute, it rolled away. We memorized the shape, the sound. He's not giving up easy. Naraya whispered, "Neither are we." I answered, later, in my kitchen. I checked my phone. A new voicemail played only breathing. Then a low voice, "Next time. It's not paper you'll lose." By dawn, my kitchen table had turned into a war desk. 3 folders lay in a neat row: financial, surveillance, coercion audio, each tabbed with sticky notes, each page logged with dates and times. I photographed the folder spines for my own inventory before sliding them into my tote. Then I texted Harlan one line delivering today. He answered with a thumbs-up emoji and the words, "Meet you at the Family Justice Center at 9. I turned to Naraya. She was pale, her hands restless in her lap. I guided her through practice answers: yes, no. The date was... nothing extra. No explanations that could be twisted. We rehearsed our code phrase again in case she got overwhelmed. The lunchbox sat sealed in a clear bag, the tracker locked in a tin, the USB copy and transcript stacked tight. Originals were split, one in my fireproof pouch at home, one traveling with me. Everyday things still happened: oatmeal bubbling on the stove, the porch light clicking off with sunrise. But in my head I kept repeating, we're not asking for permission. We're confirming facts. We left early, blending into the school traffic, just another car on the road. No spectacle, only steps. The Family Justice Center greeted us with calm walls and calm people. An intake advocate listened carefully as we laid everything out: the forged power of attorney hints, the receipt from the mechanic who'd removed the tracker, the audio files with Ransom's threats. She explained options in plain talk: lethality screening, protective orders, referrals for fraud review. Her eyes lingered on our chain of custody notes. "This," she said, "is solid. Most folks don't think to do it. We went through the danger assessment." Naraya's voice didn't shake once. She kept her eyes on me and answered steady. The advocate built a safety plan: alternate phone, the flip one in her purse, safe pickup spots for Isolda, a code phrase for church staff if she needed quiet help. A liaison officer was scheduled for later that day to photograph the items and scan our notes into a case file. I signed my name as witness on the lines that required it. When the advocate closed her folder, she said words that felt like oxygen. "You're not alone. We'll walk this with you." From a quiet room at the center, the advocate placed a call to Naraya's clinic with her permission. The admin lead picked up. Yes, she confirmed. There had been repeated calls from a spouse, calls where he asked them to note instability, to ensure compliance with certain vitamins. Each call logged with dates. Each time Naraya was at work. The admin wouldn't touch medical details, but she agreed to send a neutral letter documenting interference attempts by a third party. A nurse joined the line briefly, recalling the day Naraya came back from a hallway call shaken. She hadn't written down what was said, but she had noted the shift in her demeanor. I wrote names, titles, callback numbers. I texted Harlan, clinic corroboration secured. His reply came quick. "That anchors the audio. We asked that the letter be sent directly to Harlan's office and the liaison officer. The clinic promised it would be transmitted by close of business." Another stone placed where it belonged. At the county clerk's window, we slid forward the affidavits and logs. We were filing for an emergency protective order, surveillance, coercion audio, clinic corroboration. They all sat on the counter like stones too heavy to ignore. The clerk read carefully, nodding at intervals, then handed the file to the duty judge. Moments later, the stamp landed. A same-day EPO, no contact, distance limits, no tracking devices permitted. Harlan arrived in time to deliver his own brief on the financial anomalies. With Naraya's consent, he requested a fraud alert and freeze on the suspect mortgage file. We walked away with stamped copies in hand, the EPO notice, the case number, a service request for law enforcement to deliver it to ransom, paper that once cut, now shielded. I texted a photo of the EPO to the advocate. Her reply came back fast. Will alert the school and church with the boundaries. Beside me, Naraya exhaled, half sob, half laugh, the sound of someone drawing her first free breath. Back at my house by late afternoon, I scanned every document, clerk stamps, liaison card, clinic sheet. Duplicates went into Harlan's envelope. Originals returned to the fireproof pouch. We rehearsed neutral answers for community encounters. The court set boundaries. We're following them. No drama, no fuel for gossip. I brewed tea, the simple act grounding us. Naraya sat at the table, her shoulders finally lowering. I thought I'd shake apart in there. She admitted. You held, I said. A patrol car crept slowly down the block, likely serving the EPO. I logged the time and plate number anyway. Habit. Then came the knock, not loud, not long, just a sealed envelope sliding under my door. No return address. Inside was a single printed photo, the lunchbox sitting on my shelf. Time-stamped 1 hour ago. I lifted my eyes to the hallway, voice calm but firm. Paper bites back, and so do mothers. By sunrise. The order had teeth, and I was done whispering my daughter's name. I carried the stamped copies back to the precinct liaison desk. The officer on duty scanned them into the system, confirming the exact time ransom had been notified. I asked straight questions: what counted as contact, how to report violations, what if he sent someone in his place. He handed me a small wallet card, case number and dispatch line printed bold. I photographed it, added it to my log, and sent a copy to Harlan. Then I turned to Naraya, repeating in short sentences she could hold on to: no calls, no drive-bys, no messages through friends. The line is clean. We mapped our day, Isolde to school, then straight home. No detours, no errands. I told myself, paper is strong, but habit is stronger. Today we would live as if the order were a wall. I parked one lot over from the school's front doors, keeping our sightlines clear. The usher at the church annex gave a nod. The principal's office had a copy of the EPO pinned discreetly in their file. Naraya walked Isolde in while I stood with phone in hand. Camera ready, not hunting, just prepared to record. This was the kind of boring vigilance that saves lives. Parents gathered in 2s and 3s, eyes flicking our way. One mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded back politely. We didn't owe the town a story. We owed Isolde a day of normalcy. I scanned the street for the sedan that had idled by my porch. It wasn't there. Instead, a different SUV rolled past twice, too slow for coincidence. I jotted plate, time, and direction in my notebook. At the annex office. The committee chair confirmed the staff had been briefed. The sexton offered to walk us out to the car whenever needed. I told Naraya, we use what's offered. Doesn't have to be grand, just doors opening when we need them. She exhaled, shoulders easing as if a knot had slipped loose. Early afternoon, my flip phone buzzed with a message from Naraya. A screenshot from her porch cam, a hand leaving a small gift bag on her mat. The timestamp and geotag placed ransom well within the restricted distance. I dialed dispatch, reading the case number from the wallet card. Calm as a metronome, I said. Violation of protective order, direct presence documented. I emailed the screenshot from my offline archive to the liaison while we drove not to confront, but to meet an officer nearby. The officer retrieved the bag with gloves, photographed the scene, and logged the chain of custody. Inside a children's storybook and a note scribbled. We can work this out. On its face, harmless. In context, weaponized. The officer warned us any further breach would move from warning to arrest. Stay visible. Report quick, he said. Law moved on paper, but today the paper was walking. By late afternoon, Harlan forwarded an email to my phone. A draft custody petition filed under Ransom's name, calling Naraya unstable and non-compliant with medication. The words echoed his threats from the audio files. Same script, new setting. Minutes later, the clinic's fax reached Harlan's office, a neutral letter documenting the interference calls. 2 pieces landing on the same day, lie meets ledger. I put Harlan on speaker so Naraya could hear. He outlined the counter attached the clinic's letter, the EPO, the transcript from the lunchbox audio. Naraya drafted a declaration, just dates and facts, no adornment. Truth doesn't need flowers, it needs daylight. In my notebook, I underlined one line twice. Custody is not a prize. Safety is not a bargaining chip. We sent the packet to the clerk before the window closed. Another door closed to him. Another opened for her. Evening settled soft, but not quiet. I cooked red beans and rice, food that says, "You're safe enough to eat slowly." Naraya managed 4 bites, each steadier than the last. We sat in the silence that follows action, not triumph, not relief, just the sober calm of having done the right thing. Isolde called to say she liked her art class project. Naraya's eyes welled, but her smile held. I filed the day's papers, duplicating everything into the fireproof pouch. On a sticky above my desk I wrote, "We will not whisper her life. Outside." A car door thudded. Footsteps paused at my gate, then faded away. I logged the time, not panicked, just precise. My phone chimed with a new email from the liaison, "Be available tomorrow morning, updates on violation and petition response." I looked around my house, my voice steady as iron. "We'll be up early, by 9 a.m. The badge, the binder, and the bench were in the same room, and so was the truth. I arrived with Harlan, our binder heavy with tabs, each one like a small blade. We laid it open on the liaison table, coercion audio, surveillance, financials, protective order. I spoke to Naraya in short, steady lines she could repeat to herself. Look at the judge, not at him. Answer only what's asked. Breathe between each reply. The liaison officer confirmed service of the order, and yesterday's breach with the gift bag? The photograph and chain of custody report were already prepared for the judge. Harlan tapped his notes in order: audio first, clinic letter second, bank metadata third, the devices and receipts next, and finally, the violation. I slipped Isolde's school schedule into the safety tab, whispering, "Paper protects when people doubt." Pastor Amos found us in the hallway, laid a hand on our shoulders, and prayed not for victory but for clarity. I felt my back straighten under his words. The hearing opened quickly. The judge asked for a narrow showing, and Harlan wasted no motion. He led with the bank documents. A compliance officer joined by phone, explaining the logbook entries, repeated authorization override manual input tied to a device credential, not in Naraya's name. He laid it plain: an override leaves a trace. Each one matched dates when Naraya was clocked in at the clinic she couldn't have signed. Ransom's jaw twitched when the officer read the terminal suffix. Defense tried to wave it off as simple budgeting, but the officer didn't bend. "Budget adjustments don't require overrides," he said flatly. "Only signature-level changes do." The judge leaned forward, eyes steady, pattern established. For the first time in weeks, my breath didn't catch it, steadied. Next, Harlan cued the recording Ransom's voice. Sharp, commanding, "Sign it, or I'll have to note your instability." Naraya's small voice followed, breaking but clear. The room hushed. We laid out the clinic's neutral letter dates and calls logged. Interference attempts documented. The judge marked it in the record. I presented the photo's pinhole camera sewn into the lunchbox lining. The GPS tracker sealed in a tin, removal receipt with serial numbers. Chain of custody papers clipped neatly behind. The liaison officer testified on the EPO, breached the porch gift bag. The timestamp, the contents logged. The judge's words were firm, not loud. The temporary order extended into a 1-year protective order, no contact explicit, tracking devices forbidden, and Naraya granted temporary sole decision-making for Isolde. Ransom erupted, his voice cracking. "She's unstable," the judge's gavel struck once. "Soft but final, sir. Your words are now on this record. Sit down." And in that stillness, the gallery heard the difference between volume and truth. Court security escorted him out. The liaison leaned back in violation plus disruption meant custody review. He would be processed that day. Outside on the courthouse steps, a DV advocate pressed a card into Naraya's hand. I thanked her out loud, so everyone passing by could hear where help lived. Harlan filed an extension on the fraud alert before we left, drafting a civil preservation letter to both bank and clinic locking their files against sudden accidents. I listed next steps as if they were groceries locks changed. School pickup list updated with the order attached. New phone line for Naraya by Friday. A neighbor asked in a low voice. "How did you do it?" I answered plain. "We documented. We asked for help. We didn't argue, we proved." It wasn't a slogan, it was a staircase. Valora texted me a photo of lemon bars cooling on her counter to dial. I wrote back, safe for now. That night, I set the binder back in its pouch, fireproof and ready. Naraya signed the safety addendum. Isolde asked if she could take her sketchbook to church tomorrow. Yes, I told her, and meant more than paper and pencil. I called Pastor Amos, arranging a monthly night at the Annex Paper and Peace. Folks would learn chain of custody, how to log, how to ask for help without shame. He said the room was ours. I turned to Naraya at the table. Control isn't love. Love is the room you can breathe in. She nodded, shoulders lower, not healed but beginning. Before I closed the binder, an email pinged the judge's signed order and the bank's notice. Forwarded by Harlan, Shadows no longer owned the record. Later. A soft knock sounded. I opened the door to a neighbor, whispering, "My sister needs what you have." I stepped aside, wide enough for her to enter.